this one because we're 100% committed to your success. So thank you again for joining us today. I'm just going to briefly allow anyone who is registered on our Zoom call, if you'd like to take this opportunity to introduce yourself, just give us your name and your business name. That would be awesome.
I think I'm the only one still on. I don't know. Anyway.
That's okay, Sarah. Go for it.
Okay. Sarah Evans. I'm a hostess. Been a hostess at 10 years at Lacey's Tapas Restaurant. And we will be reopening July 30th.
Cannot wait for that day. Thank you, Sarah, for always being one of our loyal participants at our weekly roundtable. So appreciate you and the insight you provide. For those of you who are joining us live on Facebook, please feel free to leave comments in the comment box as we have our discussion, as well as our question and answer session. We'll absolutely address those comments. And as people decide to trickle in on Zoom, you can also use the chat box if you're a little shy and want to, or a little more introverted and want to remain anonymous. Please feel free to use the chat box as well. So without further ado, I really want to transition over to this phenomenal topic because I think it's just super important for us as women business owners to learn how to focus on our work-life integration. And I'm going to purposely use that word and not work-life balance. So, Barb, why don't you introduce our guest today?
So we have the privilege of having Dr. Christine Allen here of Insightful Business Works. It's Insight Business Works, right?
Insight Business Works.
Yeah, but I'm going because she is really insightful. I mean, going
yes, she is.
So I'm going
Thank you.
When I see you, I thought insightful, but I go, yeah, no, it's Insight Business Works. And with Dr. Christine Allen, she is a workplace psychologist and an executive coach. And we are really very, very privileged to have her here because I've met Christine through the WBOC and through different WISE events. And she really is such a great resource of knowledge and information. And she's really here to help us take a look at some of the work-life harmony that we can have not only in the COVID times, but that we can carry it out for our future. And she's got some great tips. So with that, Christine, I'm going to allow you to take it away.
Hi, and nice to see both of you, Barb and Sarisa, and haven't met Sarah that I know of. I've been to Lacey's many times and look forward to it reopening. So thanks for being on the roundtable with us. It's nice to have someone on the Zoom call in addition to our Facebook Live participants. Back in the day, I did a few of these roundtables in the past when we were able to have in-person roundtables, and always enjoyed the conversation because as much as I like to share information that I know from research or from data, I think conversation with what people are experiencing in real life, in their businesses and in their personal lives is always a much richer experience than just presenting information. So I'm excited for the dialogue. I use the term work-life harmony, although I'm also fine with integration or blend. I am not a fan of work-life balance, even in non-pandemic times, for a couple of reasons. I've done a number of different kinds of workshops and trainings over the years, helping especially women entrepreneurs, because it's so challenging for women who are either doing their side business as they're growing it into a full-time business while they're working full-time, while they're parenting young kids, while they have a spouse that works. They might have parents that are aging, they're taking care of, and this is all not even during like pandemic times. So it's challenging for women and entrepreneurs. And as Teresa and Barb and WISE knows, I mean, women's small businesses are what's the fastest growing part of the economy, businesses in our economy that are powered by small business anyway, but women's small businesses. So we need to think as women entrepreneurs about ways that we can support ourselves, take care of ourselves, and be smart about this concept of work-life harmony. Because if we don't, you know, if we burn out, is there some echo that I'm hearing an echo in my own? Okay. If we burn out, if we, you know, flame out, you know, then no matter what our idea is, no matter what kind of business we're trying to grow, it can't be successful. So with that, I think balance is like a concept to me that implies perfection, and I'm an anti-perfection person. I feel like women put so much pressure on themselves to be perfect, to meet all these standards that other people expect of us. And so I think work-life balance, you know, it implies that. And so I don't like it for that reason. I also think it's just impossible. No matter what your situation is, it's impossible to achieve. So harmony, so I'll say a little bit about harmony, and then if people have thoughts or comments about that, then we can jump into some other, like how do you cultivate? I don't like the word achieve work-life harmony. How do you grow it? How do you cultivate it? But so harmony implies like just what it is, a pleasant blend like of notes that go together well. And my tune or my song or my story is really different and unique from yours. And so your tune, it could have more complexity to it, and mine might be simpler or more straightforward. Or, you know, some people do like, music that's more intense or more complicated, but we all know when there are notes that don't go together well, when it's discordant, when it like, so how do we put together a blend or an integration or a harmony in terms of our own life activities? And I think COVID-19 has highlighted not one size does not fit all. Some people are working more and harder than ever because they are now the new essential frontline workers, even though they were never hired. They never thought they were going to be that. You know, the people who work in restaurants as takeout, or pharmacies or grocery stores or packing things, and other people are working less and worried about their incomes and maybe thinking about how to start their own business in this. So one side, some people are online schooling their children or when school was in session, and other people are having more time on their hands, so they're remodeling their bathroom. So it really isn't, so if you read something, an article in a magazine or online magazine that says, here are the 5 things that you need to do to, I'm saying it in my authoritative voice, the 5 things you need to do to be able to, achieve work-life balance or in the time of COVID, it just couldn't be true. So your job, in my view, is to figure out what works for you. And that's really a passion of mine, so.
You know, as you're talking about the balance, and I never really thought of this, about it being really perfection, and it's really impossible. You know what I ended up seeing? I saw the balance scale.
Absolutely.
And so rigid. But then when you ended up talking about harmony and the music and the blend, I just saw like a picture of a music score that is just moving because it needs to move as life happens. And so that was just such a great analogy when you started talking about that. That's what came up for me, the fixed versus the fluid, because you can't. from there.
Yeah, it's that fluid dynamic. So like, even if you know yourself, you have this thread, this tune, this melody running through your whole life that is you. But then sometimes, when you're single and you don't have, a house or responsibilities like children to take care of or whatever, you might have a simpler tune. At other times, or you're single-minded because you're focusing on your startup, or you're finishing your graduate school or medical school. So there are times in your life when your tune might be like, your melody is very straightforward. And then there are other times when there are all these complex notes, but it's still the same you. It's still the same tune. And in my view, it's your job or our jobs as individuals to figure out, not put notes in that fit for you because somebody else says I should, but to figure out what really fits for me. And I don't think that there are a lot of people who help us to think about it, like what fits for me.
Yeah. And I think like what you ended up saying is it's individual. But again, you gave me another analogy of, and again, seeing what notes. It's the same tune playing. It's just like maybe, are you putting in more notes to make a chord that isn't going to fit in your life because somebody suggested it? So how can you pull that out and make it simpler so that you can feel that you are in harmony from there? Yeah. I've got this picture now.
That's great. That's great.
So
are there other thoughts about that before I jump into something else? Or
yeah, I'd like to just add something. Just I will admit I am a recovering perfectionist.
A lot of us are, Sarisa. Yeah.
And, so I struggle with this idea of work-life harmony and work-life integration and all of these things, just managing and balancing and integrating the two. And I have noticed that a lot of times when I have conversations with other women, whether they are business owners, entrepreneurs, or they are working in full-time careers, really what we find in the back of our head is, okay, it's the perfectionism complex, but then in the front that sort of builds on this challenge is this guilt that we kind of build up, that we're not doing the best we can in various areas. So like I personally struggle with that as a new mom with my 3-year-old girl who keeps me on my toes every day, trying to figure out how to balance good enough in all of these various areas, so being an entrepreneur and knowing when something is good enough to release to the world, from that perspective, being a mom and knowing, when the house is clean enough, to go to bed and things like that. Do you have any tips that you could share, Christine, for other women who are like me, that are battling that guilt and that perfectionism complex?
Well, it's interesting, Sarisa. It's great that you're asking about it, because when I do one of the work-life harmony workshops, I have people kind of go through and figure out sort of their own personality, their own values, their life stage, like are they new moms or are they single, to try to design a plan for themselves. But then I get to general issues like boundaries, saying no, guilt. So you're bringing up a really important one. I think to my mind, as a psychologist, I see guilt is a feeling, and we're not going to completely eliminate it. So the job isn't to get rid of guilt, but it's the job not to give it too much credence, not to over listen to it. It's a normal emotion. And when a wonderful, loving mother, as well as devoted businesswoman who cares about her business, is trying to I'm not going to use the word balance, but to try to meet all these varying needs and demands, it's just a natural feeling, but it doesn't mean that you know, I always say, don't believe everything you think. You know, it's a thought, it's a feeling, not something that tells the truth always about what we need to do. So that would be one tip, is just to not overvalue it. And the goal isn't just to eliminate it and never feel it, because that's not really possible, especially for someone who really cares about what she's doing. Someone who cares about her daughter, cares about her business. It's just not possible to not feel guilt. The second part is that the research really suggests that self-compassion is so important. And so the solution in my mind is cultivating self-compassion, especially if we're recovering perfectionists. And, you know, I grew up like that myself. You know, I grew up with a parent who intended very, very well, but always said to me, no matter what I did, is that the best you can do? And I'm like, oh, I think it is, but maybe it isn't, you know? So it really led me to always try harder to somehow please. So I think a lot of us, you know, and women often feel like we have to do things more and better than, you know, in order to get our seat at the table or to be heard. Or so self-compassion means both, you know, recognizing that we're human, and that means that we're not the only one going through this. And so when we recognize that there are lots of women out there, moms, entrepreneurs, who are feeling like, is it okay to go to bed and leave this laundry unfolded, or, you know, or the lunch, you know, maybe not completely, if it was school, made for tomorrow, you know, to know that we're human, we're not alone. I think talking to ourselves in kind ways, we tend to talk to other people in kind ways, you know, especially our friends, our children, our family members. We say, oh, you know, it's going to be all right, or you did the best you could, or, you know, there's always tomorrow, or, you know, but we don't always talk to ourselves like that. So I think it feels weird when we talk to ourselves like that. And that's because we haven't practiced it. So practicing being kind and saying, you know, it's okay, you know, to leave things unfinished, and I can get to that tomorrow. And research actually shows when we say, instead of I say I, when I say you, to talk to myself, you can go to bed now, Chris. You've done enough for today. Your job now is to sleep. Research shows that it actually works better than when we say I should go to bed. You know, so that's a silly little tip. And then finally, I would just say, you know, kind of staying in today is another piece of self-compassion, according to the literature. You know, not staying present focused, not like, well, I'll never be able to get any better at this, or this always, you know, I always struggle with this, but just trying to be in today, whatever is the current situation, and not to get kind of caught up in the rehearsing for the future or rehashing the past. So those are some tips. The final thing I would just say is that as a mom, especially as a mom of daughters, I have a daughter and a son, but I always thought when my daughter was little, and even for my son, about, you know, what women should grow up to do. I think, what kind of example am I setting for them if I take care of her, but I never take care of me? You know what I mean? Right. And then she'll grow up thinking, like, to be a good mom, a really good mom or successful woman, you gotta like go to bed at 2 a.m. or you gotta, you know, do better than everybody else. And I really didn't want that message for my daughter. And I didn't want my son to grow up expecting, you know, women in his life to be like that. So that helped me.
That's a really great point, Christine. It reminds me of when I was in corporate. We think about the corporate leaders, and they would, you know, send you to workshops and things talking about work-life balance or work-life, all of these things, but then they wouldn't model it themselves. So then you go home thinking, how realistic is it that, you know, I'll be successful in this life? So I love the way you say that, thinking about what you're modeling in your own home, you know, using yourself as that baseline is a great example.
You know, Christine, one of the things, and you went back and you was talking about guilt and just being human. And you know what, I think you know, part of one of the things that started me on my journey was really kind of studying positive psychology
Mhm.
and studying with Tal Ben-Shahar. And one of the things
Mm.
he always says is permission to be human.
Mm.
And you know, it's like, and especially as women,
Mhm.
giving ourselves that permission. And then his cohort in the training was Maria Serrois. And then she goes, permission to be magnificent. And so I go, permission to be human when you need to
Right.
be. We make mistakes. We're not, we can't be all to everything. And like Sarisa, you with your daughter and juggling business and everything else, permission to be human, to be enough. And then at the same time, permission to excel at everything that you can. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And I really appreciate you bringing that up. And I'm just, you know, envious as can be that you studied with Tal Ben-Shahar and having read some of his books. But, you know, I think, and again, he was a recovering perfectionist for sure. But we're all works in progress, but that permission to be magnificent fits into this harmony and this tune that is through your life. And one of the things I really help people to do is to try to identify and I use a number of different tools, but it really doesn't matter about the tool. It's really about self-awareness. What floats my boat? What are my unique personality strengths? And in thinking about work-life harmony, you know, you have to think like in this time of COVID, you know, if I'm an extrovert and I see a lot of extroverts, you know, I'm an extrovert, but I see a lot of extroverts really struggling because they are really missing that connection. And Zoom only, or Facebook Live, or these connections online only go so far for those of us who just thrive off of, you know, like your guest last week, Laura Surway, interaction with people. If you're more on the introverted side, it also can be a strain to do this on COVID, during COVID on Zoom, because you may, as Sarisa pointed out, you know, not feel as comfortable like just jumping in and chiming in on in the middle of a meeting or on a platform. So, and introverts need people too. It's not that they don't need people. So I think understanding ourselves, we can't be magnificent if we don't value our own gifts. And so one of the things that I love to do, both in my coaching, but also in my workshops and training, is help people identify their unique gifts. Because I'm never going to be, you know, uniquely good at the things you are, Barbara, the things that, you know, that just really are your tune, your uniqueness, or Sarisa, or Sarah, or Carolyn, who I know is our administrator today and working on those. So it's our job to figure out what do I bring? You know, how am I going to show up as my best self, or my, you know, best version of me? And so I feel like that really fits for me right into the work-life harmony. You can't create harmony if you don't know what tune, you know, you're singing, you know, what's your unique, you know, kind of set of gifts. But I love the phrase, permission to be magnificent. I had not heard that. So thank you for that.
I love that as well. Thanks, Barb.
So Christine, you talked about the best self and identifying your gifts. What do you think our listeners might be able to do to go through some of that, to really be able to hone it? You talked about values, you talked about strengths, you talked about gifts. So what do you think some of our listeners might be able to do?
Well, you know, a lot of times people take some kind of assessment in their work or whatever, a Myers-Briggs, a DISC, you know, those are both things I'm certified in, as well as the psychological assessments that people use for normal personality assessment. But also People Map is something that I've done. I know Sarisa has done that. And, you know, but whatever tool you've used, it doesn't have to just become shelf help. You put it in a file drawer somewhere, and you know, you try to like really think about, well, what did I learn about me, you know? And You know, and then other aspects of your, you know, think about who you've been your whole life. You know, what always came easy for you? What could you do without even thinking about it twice? You know, that you couldn't stop yourself from doing. You know, if you tried, you don't have to be paid to do it. What have you done, you know, since you were like 6 years old, 7, 8 years old, that people always appreciate about you? Ask 3 people who know you really, really well, independently, what are my greatest gifts? And that makes people so uncomfortable. They really hate asking people that question, but they're usually glad they did. And then I ask people to write it down. So rather than ask someone to write it down for you, interview them and then write it down and kind of look for what hangs together. And that will tell you a little bit about what your unique, you know, what's your unique fingerprint of sort of personality. I think values are a little separate for personality. So you might have a different personality than me, but we might have shared core values. And you see this in like a lot of healthy marriages. People have opposite personalities, but on the core values, they're kind of really aligned in terms of whether it's about caring about family, if it's about honesty, if it's about, you know, faith, whatever it is. So identifying your core values is important. And there are a lot of tools out there that are free. Like you mentioned, positive psychology. AuthenticHappiness.com is the University of Pennsylvania's positive psychology site. They have a values and action character strengths assessment you can take. You could also take it through via.org. And for free, they'll give you like your top 5 character strengths, your values and action. There are other tools that you can use to try, and maybe you already know, like what are your top 2 or 3 values. So I think if you can put those things together and you think about what's my life stage? Where am I at? Are my kids out of the house? And I can now think more about me, which is a little bit my situation. Do I have, you know, do you have live-in parents you're taking care of? So think, where am I in my life stage? And then you could kind of think about, you know, what do I uniquely offer? And also, what do I need in order to create the work-life harmony that is really fulfilling for me? What really fulfills me, floats my boat? There are people who work all the time and their tune is very simple, but you couldn't stop them from doing it. That is who they are, and they're always going to do that, and that's what they love. And that's not wrong, you know? And then there are other people who, you know, their joy and satisfaction comes primarily from, you know, some of their relationships and family, and, you know, they work to have the resources they need to create that kind of life. And that's not wrong, you know? So I feel like we have to stop putting on ourselves, you know, this expectation of what a meaningful, fulfilling life looks like.
But I love the way you talked about, you know, the values, your actions, and the what's really, you know, filling people, your gifts. And really just, again, I'm still seeing this music score just moving. And it's just, these are the notes that you're putting into your life that are your core beliefs, your core actions, your core values, so that you can feel that harmony.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm really appreciating all of the different strategies that you're offering us, Christine. And for those who are just now joining us on Facebook, again, I'm Sarisa Richardson, a business consultant at the WISE Women Business Center. And joined with me today is Christine Allen. And we're talking about work-life harmony. And you're just providing us so many phenomenal strategies that I really want to open it up and give this opportunity for other people who may be on the call today, or those of you who are joining on Facebook, if you're leaving comments, I'd love to, just open it up for this last half hour with some questions and answers. And of course, Barb and myself, we've got tons of questions for you, Christine. But let's see if anyone on the call, does anyone have questions?
Sarah, do you have anything you'd like to chime in or ask?
No, not at the moment. I'm just listening.
Okay.
And we've got no questions on Facebook currently. So Christine, I'd like to just ask, as a business strategy, how are you seeing successful women entrepreneurs implement work-life harmony strategy in their lives as business owners, and how are you seeing their actual business?
Well, I mean, one of the things, I guess I'm thinking both during COVID and, before COVID, just generally, but excuse me, this is not a COVID cough, it's just a cough. Like your daughter, no COVID.
So that's an inside joke, folks. My husband and I are in lightening up our moods at home. We're training our daughter after she coughed to say no COVID.
I love it. It's information, communication. So yeah, I think I just have a little cold that I'm recovering from, but the bottom line is the, old, I love quotes generally. And one, I think this is an anonymous proverb, but maybe I'm not sure if it's a Chinese proverb, but you can't pour from an empty cup. So a lot of women go into business, not just so they can, making money is important and it's good and it's legitimate, but they also go into business because there's something that they have a talent or a skill, something that they want to contribute. They have an idea. They want to make a difference in their community or in the world. So I think women entrepreneurs, as a general rule, do seem to have gone into business around something like that they feel like not only is good for them, but is good for others. And, if you don't have work-life integration, work-life blend, work-life harmony, I really believe that you won't, in the end, you'll burn out. And certainly we all know some people who have been in business who have left their business, not just because the business itself wasn't doing well, but there's an impact. If you're burning out, you can't do your business. And you also don't present a great role model if you're trying to grow a team and you're trying to hire other people, as well as with your own customers and vendors. I think that's, again, about how we show up. So to my mind, it's kind of like that old, in psychology, there was the self-actualization pyramid that Abraham Maslow came up with, where at the very bottom is like your basic needs, like for safety, shelter, or whatever, and then top is like being self-actualized. If we could reconstruct that triangle, thinking about, well, what are the basic things that, I need, or each of us needs as women entrepreneurs in order to be able to build the kind of successful business but it can't be an afterthought. And I think a lot of times it's not designed on purpose. And one of the things I share in common with lots of other coaches, including like you, Barb, is the idea of designing our life on purpose, being intentional. And I feel like that's not something that I grew up I always was planful. I was always determined. I always had I'll push through this. That's the kind of value system I grew up with, was like, if you set your mind to it, you can do it. But I didn't ever think about it from the perspective until I became a coach as much about well-being, how do I succeed by designing, figuring out what I need in order to be able to do that? And how does, what's the right blend or harmony? And I love, I have a slide in one of my presentations that is exactly the way you describe it, Barb. It's like, it's like a living kind of a music score that looks like it's dancing. And that's on one of my slides. And I have the balance scale also on another slide that looks really, to me, it looks oppressive. So I think, success needs to be thought of in a really broad way. And I want people to have their businesses be successful, but, you need to design it on purpose. And I think I've seen people, and I'm curious about your own experiences, if you've known people or struggled with that yourself, of, and I do a lot of work on resilience, which is kind of a related concept, psychological and emotional resilience, and I do it a lot with healthcare professionals. It's shocking that a lot of medical residents, they already are in the burnout, on the Maslow burnout scale. They're already in burnout stage before they've even finished their residency and started as doctors. It is just terrifying, really. So I work with them too on thinking about how do you, again, like your point, Sarisa, if corporate America is saying, teaching you this, but they're not role modeling it. And I think medical residents experience a lot of the same thing. They might get a training on work-life balance, but then their role models are saying, you're not doing it right, you're not doing enough. So back to the entrepreneur question, I think, it's critical that to be successful in your business, that you have to design it on purpose and be thinking about the harmony, the work-life harmony you want to create, and that it will only, I truly, truly believe it will only help you be successful in your business.
As you're talking about design, and we're talking about entrepreneurs, and we're talking about getting on purpose, everybody as an entrepreneur, especially in startup, you're thinking, I got to do this, I got to do that, all these different things. Can you talk a little bit more about how to go about setting some priorities, Kristen?
Yeah. I mean, I think I just sighed because I think it's very challenging, and it's especially challenging if you also are trying to raise kids, and then again, during COVID, they were in school, but then they're not in school, or even if they were in daycare or preschool, then that's closed. And then you're trying to juggle all these balls and, figure out where you should put your attention. I think having, if you don't have a coach, and I know that's one of the benefits of WISE Business Centers, is you can get coaching for your business. And I would think the business counselors and coaches, I assume, I don't know, but, are also helping them sort of to design on purpose. What do I focus on first, and what should come later. But I just think, you need to do that also with your personal life. So to my mind, the dust bunnies under the staircase or whatever are not as important as having a meal with my child and my spouse, to sit together and eat together. That is, priority, whereas the dust bunnies running around, can wait, or something like that. So thinking about both for your business strategy, what do I do first? And also having someone, a coach, or, there are maybe some various resources that, we could point people to help people begin to think about what are again, Stephen Covey. I know Laura, I listened to the roundtable last week with Laura Surway, whom I love, and she was talking about Stephen Covey on there, about his begin with the end in mind. But another thing Stephen Covey said was put the big rocks in first. And if any of you have seen a demonstration of the big rocks, they take like a glass and they, like a glass, and they put a bunch of pebbles in it and sand, grains of sand, and then they try to shove some big rocks in top, and it doesn't work. But when you put the big rocks in first, and then you pour the sand and the grains and the pebbles around it, you're able to get a lot more in there. And so what happens is that in our daily lives, we spend grains and the pebbles. We respond to email because somebody else is demanding something of us. We get caught up, maybe, I'm not saying my house does, it's not horrible really, but we get caught up in the dust bunnies, or really, I could show you with my camera, it's not horrible, but we get,
Christine.
Yeah, we get caught up in the things that are maybe less important, and we fail to think about what's important for me. And that's my distinction between big rocks and priorities. Well, people often, you'll read something and say, well, you have to prioritize, but how do I know what are the right priorities for me? And that's where this designing your life on purpose with that, the notes you want to put in there, your own talents, your own ways of being magnificent. I just love that, permission to be magnificent. How do I figure out what magnificent looks like for me? And so instead of looking at it to what it is for someone else's business, there are lots of coaches out there, but there's plenty of space in the coaching space for each of us to find our own niche and be magnificent in our own ways, or for the kind of business that you're doing, Sarisa. So I don't know if that answered the question. I kind of tend to ramble.
No,
Well,
I thought
great.
that was extremely insightful, Chris. I think it's interesting thinking about being an entrepreneur in this time of COVID, and you talk about being intentional about how you design your business to be in harmony with your strengths and talents and things like that. One of the things that I've been curious and interested in seeing as I've been coaching some of our clients at WISE is knowing when to, I don't want to call it delegate, because a lot of times when we're entrepreneurs, it's usually a business of one, right? It's usually we're running the show, right? And a lot of times I find myself coaching people into recognizing that it's time to bring on a staff, although, it may not seem, you may not seem comfortable with it from a financial perspective, but that is an actual business strategy where you are able to free up some of your time to grow your business in other ways. So, Christina, I'm just curious, are there other strategies like that that entrepreneurs can consider as we're trying to design our business to be in harmony with ourselves and our strengths?
Yeah, that's really such a great question. And I think it perhaps relates to the perfectionism, but I also think it relates to people that do start businesses are usually, there are differences. I'm not the biggest risk taker out there in the world. I wouldn't have thought that I would have, started my own business. So, but one of the things that's true is that they're go-getters, and they're very self-reliant people that tend to start businesses. Like they're those gritty, determined, I can push through this. So I think that letting go and letting yourself trust that, someone else could be helpful to you, and taking that kind of risk of, letting go a little bit of control, not only financially, but will somebody else do it the way I would? Those are really big challenges. I know for myself, my business has been so much more successful as I have allowed other people and paid other people to help me with things that I am not good at, that I don't love, that I don't get up every day saying, oh boy, let me do this. And it has really freed me up to have more time to do the things I do love, which is to be with people and connect with people. And even like I've been working on doing more virtual things because that's the world we live in. And I know this sounds silly, but I truly have been working on liking virtual connection more instead of thinking about it as second class to in person. And I had to really work with myself around that, to say, this is just different. It's not less than, there are ways in which it has a bigger reach or bigger impact. And sometimes it's very intimate. And so, but I had to do a little I guess part of it is that mindset work that you're talking about, Sarisa, having a mindset, checking in on your mindset, to say, is there something I could be doing to make my business and my life more, harmonious for me, and that might include asking for help, delegating, hiring someone else, or changing your mindset about something that, recognizing that I had a block to seeing virtual connection. That's something that comes very natural to me and that I love, and I would do it whether I got paid or not. I've had 5-hour plane trips across the country and had a sales guy who sells in Asia tell me I should pay you for this 5 hours. And I'm like, because we talked about his boss and, the kind of challenges he was facing. And I'm like, this is just what I do, whether I don't care if I get paid or not. It's what I love. So we can't do what we love if we're caught up. And running a business, as as business counselors and WISE, there are lots of things, boxes to check and things you have to do. And they're not all things that we all love. So how do we build a business that's sustainable in terms of, our role as founder, or, the person who's doing the main part of whatever business it's in. Does that answer your question, Teresa?
It absolutely does. Thank you so much for that. And again, for those of you joining, I see a couple, I can see people joining on Facebook and things. For those of you joining on Facebook, I am Sarisa Richardson talking with Christine Allen, and she is giving us some phenomenal tips on work-life harmony. So I certainly encourage you to leave comments and ask questions in the chat box and comment box, and we'll address those. Barb, you got anything for Christine?
Well, as we're talking about, what are our core things that we do? I like to call it the zone of genius.
Mm-hmm.
Like, your zone of genius is that's what I love. I mean, it's the coaching, it's the working with people. That is my zone of genius. And it's like, when I start listing of all the things that I need to do in the business, what are the core things that it goes back to your harmony, what you were talking about. What are the core things? What are my core beliefs? What are my core actions that I love to do? That's my zone of genius. And then everything else, maybe, social media, or maybe writing some things, or maybe whatever. Those are not in your zone, and those are the things that you can offload from there. That's, as soon as you started talking about that, Christine, I was thinking zone of genius.
I love the zone of genius. That's wonderful. Thank you. Well, what you said makes me think too, Barb. I hadn't thought about it in terms of the harmony until you said this, but probably part of it, whatever is your zone of genius or permission to be magnificent, what your true, unique kind of gifts, if you're not spending enough time doing that, you are going to be unhappy, you know? And so it's a part of, is your business going to grow and be successful, or you can make connections with customers or clients if you're not in that zone of genius, but also you're not going to be in harmony because you're not going to be spending enough time doing what you love. So
absolutely. And that is something that I'm still realizing, what things do I need to offload as I'm doing it kind of ties into a little bit of the discussion of the rocks and the pebbles and the sand. And it's like, those rocks are the things I really want to do. And those are the things that are going to really, make me thrive and flourish, and then allowing some of the pebbles to be taken care of by some other people.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ben.
Mhm.
Chris, I'd like to ask, since we're getting it's 12:50 and we're getting close to 1 o'clock, surprisingly, I'd like to ask if you have anything else to add that we may not have covered yet.
Mhm. The only other thought right now is one of the things I do a lot of workshops also on the concepts of mindfulness and about presence. And there was, in one of my presentations, I got this idea and slide from a woman, blocking on her name right now. I like to attribute people to people, but she had this slide up that said, "You must be present to win," which is a sign from a bingo hall. That's what it says on the hall on the wall at bingo. You must be present to win. But I think it's true too for work-life harmony and succeeding in business. And so if we're so distracted, kind of juggling all these balls. And I know when my kids were home and I was starting to grow my business, in like 2009, 2010, my kids were like middle schoolers and things like that. And, Hannah would say, "Mom, are you going to come and, watch this show with me and Tom? Or could you play this game with me?" It was very tempting to say, "I'm writing a proposal. I'm working on a workshop." And I really recognize that, first of all, your kids, it seems like they'll always be home, but they won't always be home. And also, that you need to be able, in that work-life harmony, you need to be able to be fully present and fully engaged in whatever you're in. So like whenever I'm in a Zoom meeting, even like not a thing like this, but a meeting, I turn off all my other I don't check my email. I make a commitment to be all in and all there. So I think that we, as women generally, and especially as women entrepreneurs, we are juggling a lot of balls, but to be fully present for whatever it is we're doing. And when you design your life on purpose, then you can say, okay, I've got all these different balls in the air, but right now I'm going to focus on this ball. So that would be my last thought.
I love that, Chris, and it's really relevant. We got a comment on Facebook I'd like to read for you that I think ties in greatly with what you just said. So it says, "Being a solo entrepreneur, I multitasked for many years to get things done. Now I need to learn how or relearn how to focus on one thing, which is my planned priority, and not get sidetracked on emails, IG, or other small multitasking jobs. So my question is, any tricks that you know of to stay focused and finish one thing without getting sidetracked?" So I'll give that question to you, Christine, but before that, I'll just say, one tip you already just mentioned, which is when you're on things like forums like this, all of the many Zoom calls we have, to turn on the do not disturb on your phone or other device so that you don't get those notifications popping up while you're trying to be present. So Chris, do you have any other strategies, or Barb?
Do you want to say something, Barb?
Oh, go ahead, Christine.
Okay. All right. Well, I think there's this is such a common, and probably you guys too get it as coaches, but it's a common question I get from people because people want to be productive, but they get pulled into all these other directions. So people have to, again, I think I love playing with my clients, that's the word I would use, to try to figure out what is a unique strategy that works for them. Some strategies that some of my coachees over the time have found is a method called the Pomodoro method. I don't know if but it's really the Pomodoro method is about setting like a timer for like 25 minutes and then going full tilt at whatever you're doing for that 25 minutes and then taking a 5-minute break. So in the 5-minute break, you could check your email, you could get up and stretch, you could pet your cat, you could, and then doing 3 Pomodoros and then taking a half an hour break. So the point is that I think if you've listened to the whole thing, you know that I don't believe one size fits all. So there is something to this, like our sleep cycles are about 90 minutes. So most people think we're not productive for more than about 90 minutes without needing a break. And even in this Pomodoro method, they build in the 5-minute breaks and then a half an hour break. But I don't think it's rigid. They say manage your energy, not time. You can't get more time, but you have a certain amount of energy. So I think for me, I've seen people use that method because anybody can do most anything, like full tilt for 20, like if you're trying to write something, write for 25 minutes and then take a break. But you might find 30 minutes works better for you. I would just say chunk it rather than do it in chunks. Instead of being a marathoner, think about being a sprinter. How do I sprint and then I recover? How do I sprint and then recover? So that would be a thought. I don't know if that's useful to the Facebook question, but it's a great question and a common one.
I want to, and I want to build on your present to win. There's only one thing that we can control. And I try to work with my clients on this thing, is being in the now, in this moment. And it's like, that's it. We can't control the past, we can't control the future, but how can you just be in that moment? And you end up talking about mindfulness and presence. Love it, Christine.
Mm-hmm. Being all in, all there, right?
Yes.
And I'd like to just add, so many of us are, in this work from home model during COVID. So now we've brought our offices and our workspaces physically in our home. So it can be physically difficult to not get distracted. But I'd like to say, or add, I actually physically do this. I open and close my store in my home. And it's something I learned when I decided to start my business. I interned at a local retail store so I could learn a little bit about retail. But I think there's something to be said about opening and closing your office or your store. It's okay, right. The store is closed, or the kitchen is closed, and now it's time to move on to something else. That means you're not entering back into this workspace if it's in your home. So that's one tactic that I've brought home despite my retail store being in my home.
It's a great suggestion, Sarisa, because again, for people that used to have a commute and they would use that as their boundary, they don't have a boundary like that. So you create on purpose. This is a great example of creating your work-life harmony. You create on purpose a boundary for yourself between your work and your life. So great example. So it's been so much fun.
I know we got so many great tidbits, and luckily this session and all of our Power Hour sessions are recorded, and they live on the Wise Women Business Center Facebook page. So I'd like to really just thank you, Chris. Thank you to everyone who joined via Facebook Live and who registered on Zoom. If you are enjoying this content, I'd like to just briefly mention that WISE, the Women's Business Center, is working diligently and has worked diligently over the last few months to develop content that addresses your biggest concerns. So I encourage you to like us and follow us and stay engaged with us on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram for access to this extensive knowledge base on topics.
Oops.
Something weird happened. Okay, on topics like this one, as well as financial literacy and other resources for your business. So again, I'd like to just thank you, Chris, and Barb. Anything else before we wrap up?
No, it's just been great to have Christine here, and I hope you'll come back because you're just such a wealth of knowledge, and there's so much that we could, again, the insightful works.
Thank you. I love the slip of the tongue there, Barb, but thank you. Thank you. And thank you so much for having me. It's been so much fun, and I really enjoyed it and appreciate the opportunity. And the
Our pleasure. The hour goes by so fast. So join us again next week, Wednesday at noon on Facebook Live, or register on our website. Thanks so much, guys.
Bye.
Okay. All right.